Okay, so here we are getting ready to install the knotter here. Just kind of looking at things. If we look on this other one here, so this is the knotter that's already installed. Just looking at this gear right here, you can see that the angle cut along that gear is right here. So when we line this one back up to retime it, we want to make sure that this angle cut sits exactly the same down on this pin. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get this installed and see if we can get this thing lined up correctly. Hoping for the best here. So there's this holding dowel rod or pin, whatever you want to call it, right here. So I got that all lined back up and reinstalled. Now if you kind of compare the two knotters here, you can kind of see that the angle of these looks like it's about the same. I have it where it's actually just about rested back on this little notch here. So they look almost identical. Looks like everything, the grabber here looks all about the same. So I'm going to go ahead and get this knotter installed, or the cutter installed. And then these are supposed to be tightened down to, I believe it's 1.5 inches. So the gap from here to the top of this plate is supposed to be 1.5. So I'm going to go ahead and get that tightened up. And then I'm going to go ahead and, since this looks like I'm about ready to flip the whole assembly over, I'm going to go ahead and tighten everything back down. And then I'm going to check my tolerances. Okay, so the first gap we're going to check is going to be this one here, which is the distance between the cutter and the top part of the knotter here. The factory specs for this little gap is 0.04 to 0.05. So I just went ahead and grabbed my valve gap tools here that I have for my daughter's bug, and I just put them at 0.045, so kind of right in the middle here. So we'll see how we line up. Yeah, it looks like it fits just about right. So it's right in the middle, so I'm going to call that good. So really at this point, the next adjustment here is going to be testing the gap between this where it rolls and then right here at the top of this cutter. So let me go look at those specs are and I'll be right back. Okay, so the manual says the gap between this part of the roller and the top part of this is 0.06 to 0.08. So I got my gap here at 0.059. From there it just jumps up, so it'll be close enough. And this fits in there. It's snug, but it does fit in there, so it's at the lower end of the tolerance, so we're just going to go ahead and leave it. And then the one that was already pre-installed is a little bit tighter, so that one I might actually have to adjust. Now I'm going to leave it and see if this thing still ties knots, because I figured that if it's a little tighter, that's probably a lot better than having being too far gapped out. I might pull this actual knotter or the cutter off on this one, a couple little gouges in the blade there, and sharpen that up real quick. Since I have this thing turned over and I got easy access, so that way I know everything's good. Okay, since I took this cutter off, I figured, you know what, I need to get the gap on that one just right. There's no point in me doing this if I'm not going to do it right. So what I went ahead and did is I had a small piece of metal there. This is roughly 0.015 thousandths. So what I did is I went ahead and cut a hole in the middle of it so I can reinstall it right here in between these two pins to try to bring that blade gap up where it needs to be. So let's go ahead and get this installed and recheck it. Okay, so we got both of these knotters all tightened up, all greased, the blades are all sharpened. Time to go ahead and rotate this assembly back over. So it looks like everything's lining up pretty much the same. I'm going to go ahead and bolt these assemblies down, because the next thing to check is going to be the actual needlers where they come up through, and check the timing on those. When these are at their base, they're supposed to come up and just touch these right here. So let's go ahead and get these bolted down, and then we'll check that. Okay, so the next step is to check the adjustment on the needles. So now I have this arm disconnected so I can swing them up. So what the manual says is as these needles come up, they're supposed to just barely touch. They're supposed to just barely strike here, from how I'm reading the manual at least. So as you pull these up, and one thing I am noticing, if I can get this to stay up here, is I think I might need to adjust these needles, because the difference in the gap from these on each side is actually pretty substantial. So if we look at the gap here on this needle, you can see that there's a pretty hefty gap underneath. Now if we come to the other one, the one that I just rebuilt, and look, that needle just barely, you can see the roller just barely contacts it. Whereas on this one, the roller does not. It actually misses it. So now I need to go back to the manual and see where it's supposed to strike this, and then we're going to have to adjust these needles. So I'm going to go get to the manual, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, I have to excuse the tractor in the background. I got it kind of warming up here. So really at this point, I've got everything adjusted about as close as I think I can get it. So I brought this one down a little bit. This one actually seemed like it was already pretty close. Doesn't look like I got anything touching. Tolerances are pretty close here. I think I may need to raise this one up just a hair more. But to adjust these needles so that they actually come through, what you do is underneath the tractor here, or underneath the baler, you've got bolts front and back. These ones here on each needle. So you loosen or tighten depending on which way you want it to move. Now because mine was off quite a ways, I don't know if it's bent or just something maybe hit this, but I went ahead and just barely took these loose and kind of tapped it with my mallet till it looked like it was in place, and then I slowly walked each bolt down. Just made little tiny movements, and then I go up and check it. Kind of tedious because you're doing it by yourself, but little tightening, check it. Tighten it a little bit more, check it. And then when you kind of see where you're at, then I just went back and forth, you know, equal turns to each, and again just kept verifying up top that it's where I needed it. So I'm gonna give this one last little adjustment, and then let's go get the tractor hooked up here and give it a whirl.